Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Roberta. Hello, everyone. And I'm very pleased to see you all. So I am Nicholas. My role in SECLI-FIRM was to support the partners, the case studies, and the research teams in the economic evaluation, and to link the results about the seasonal forecast, the application of seasonal forecast to economic value. And the way that I've structured my presentation, well, as you will see, I've prepared a few slides that basically take you through a simple example of what is decision trees and how we can use decision trees to value information. And I've designed this presentation assuming that I will be talking to people who don't have economics background. So it's a very simple example, but it is still, I hope that it still gives you the essence of how one can use decision trees in order to reflect the value of information and price it, if you like, and also think about risks and benefits across the value chain of the decision-making process, so to speak. Before I start taking you through my slides, my presentation is not long. It won't take us longer than another 20 minutes or so. But essentially, I'd like to spend a few minutes just to reflect on what I consider as some of the key challenges that we faced when we started thinking about economic value of seasonal forecast in SECLI-FIRM. For me, one of the most, well, not surprising things, but what actually came up as the strongest throughout this project is that the decision-making process involves so many steps that all of them are exposed to risks and benefits in different ways. So when we started, at the early stages of SECLI-FIRM, we wanted to understand how the various teams in the case studies, how management, how researchers, how traders that were involved in this project were making decisions. And this is how we started thinking about decision trees. And in the end, we used decision trees exactly for that reason. We used decision trees as a starting point to understand what benefits we get from seasonal forecasts, where, at which nodes, at which points these benefits happen, and ultimately how we can value these benefits, which was a very tricky exercise because, as I will say later, some of the benefits were qualitative. For instance, you could have that seasonal forecast improves confidence in management processes, and therefore it makes the management process smoother. And that's a qualitative benefit that is very difficult to assign a value to. Well, there are methods, of course, but it is trickier than what it is, for instance, to measure something that is directly quantifiable. So these were the challenges that we were dealing with in this project. Of course, we had a number of case studies that many of them were inherently different because they were coming from different sectors. So we were interested in benefits from using seasonal forecasts. We're interested in how we minimize losses, how we minimize damages. And therefore we were using a number of economic models, valuation models, in order to reflect these values. So let me start with defining what is a decision tree. I will start with a simple definition. What do people mean when they talk about decision trees? Well, decision tree is nothing else but, if you like, a visual representation of what choices are available to you and what outcomes these choices lead to, with what probabilities and what rewards or what costs. So people often use decision trees in order to map out the decision-making process in an organization or in in a team, if you like, in a team of researchers who work on a specific question. So decision trees is a good way to simplify complex scenarios. One of the appeals of decision trees is that it's a very intuitive tool. You can map out the decision-making process, and it helps you to visualize where the decisions happen and where the risk enters, at what points and what form. So it is a very visual tool, and many users find this appealing and find that it helps them to understand better the challenges that they're dealing with. And this is also what I was saying at the beginning, that when we're starting out with SECLI-FIRM, we want to understand really where is the benefit going to come from seasonal forecast. And as I will say again later, I believe that by using decision trees, we actually, it helped us to understand that better. So essentially, think of decision trees as a flow chart that links, it creates pathways, it represents pathways that don't overlap with each other, of course, they have to be independent, and they lead to expected outcomes and values. And we can use these expected outcomes as a measure of value in order to decide which pathway is best for us. Why are they called decision trees? Well, because they look like an inverted tree. They have root nodes, they have branches, they have leaves. And essentially, when you join these leaves and branches, you end up with a pathway. And as I said earlier, every pathway leads to a different outcome. You choose the outcome that suits you best. And what suits you best? Well, you may want to maximize value, or you may want to minimize costs, as you will see in the two examples that I've prepared. I'm going to show you later. And through this exercise, you can choose the course of action that is optimal given the situation that you're dealing with. So a bit of notation before we go to the examples. So a decision tree, a very basic decision tree, I'm going to show you very simple decision trees in this presentation. A very basic decision tree has essentially three key elements. The first one is the nodes. So this is the point at which the user has to choose something. They have to make a decision about an outcome or another outcome or a number of other outcomes. The second element is the chance node. And this is the probability that is attached to its outcome. So it is the probability with which every outcome is likely to occur. And then you have the branches, and these are the pathways, if you like, that connect outcomes, choices, and probabilities. So if we go to this simple tree that I have here, you have the decision node where the user has to decide between decision 1 and decision 2. And each one of these decisions leads to an outcome that happens with a certain probability. And then it leads to a certain event. And this event is, let's say, associated with a payoff or a cost. And then based on the probability that we assigned, we can calculate the expected value for each one of these events and choose the one that is of value to us. As I said earlier, all pathways have to be mutually exclusive, otherwise we wouldn't be able to model this. And essentially, it works like a flow chart. Okay, so the best way to get the essence of how decision trees work is through an example. And again, the assumption is that you haven't seen it before, and therefore I want to introduce you to it in the simplest possible way. So let's see this example. It's a hypothetical situation about Mary, and Mary wants to buy a new calculator, and she's presented with a choice of two different models. There is what we call a cheap model that is £450, and there is an expensive model that is priced at £750, so less than double the price, but substantially more expensive. I will call this expensive. The cheap model doesn't come with a guarantee. So if it breaks, it's gone. You have to throw it and buy a new one. There is no option of not having a calculator. Mary needs the calculator. We will find out why in the second part of the question. So Mary needs this calculator. So if she buys the chip and it's not good, she has to buy another one. The probability of the chip calculator malfunctioning is 20%. In other words, 1 out of 5 chip calculators are going to malfunction. The expensive ones are expensive for a reason, and that is because they're less likely to break. So you only get 1 out of 50 of them malfunctioning after you purchase them. And not only that, but if you're unlucky enough to buy one that is not good, you can return it, and you only have to pay for postage, and they will send you back a new one. And the assumption is that the new one is going to be working fine. The postage is £0.50. So the question here is, Mary sitting at, she's faced with this choice, and she wants to know what she should do, and she wants to model her choice. So she's going to use a decision tree in order to guide her decision. And here is a decision tree that for the question that I just described. So we have the initial node, where it's basically, what should I buy? Should I buy the cheap one or the expensive one? And then we have the chance nodes, where we're going to put the probabilities. And then we're going to have the outcomes if the calculator is a cheap calculator breaks, or if it is okay, and if the expensive calculator breaks, and if it is okay. So let's put the numbers in. And let's start with looking at the populated decision tree to understand what it means. So if Mary buys a cheap calculator, she has to pay $4.50. If the calculator breaks, she has to buy another one. So 2 times $4.50, she will end up paying £9. To keep things simple, I make the assumption that the second calculator is going to be okay by assumption. So she won't have to continue after this. This is where this model ends. This is where this node ends. So if she buys a good calculator, a cheap good calculator, that's the end of it. She doesn't have to buy it again. She only pays the first time $4.50. If Mary buys an expensive calculator, she pays more, $7.50, and if it breaks, she sends it back to the manufacturer. She pays the extra 50p postage, so she ends up paying £8. And if the calculator is good, then she doesn't need to return it. She only pays the first time, so she pays only $7.50. So this is what we know, and this is what we're going to base our decision upon. And I'm going to use these probabilities and payoffs, or if you like, expected costs, expected damages, in order to find the expected value of this purchase. And Mary is minimizing costs here. She's not maximizing benefits, she's minimizing costs. So she's going to go with the cheapest option, obviously. She's going to choose the expected value that is the smallest out of all the choices that she has. So let's find the expected value for the first pathway. And the first pathway, it's a cheap calculator and no good, it breaks. So if that happens, the expected value of this event is the probability that the calculator is not good, if it is cheap, which is 20%, times the cost. She has to buy 2 calculators, 9. So it's 20% of 9, which is 180. If the calculator is cheap and it doesn't break, then that happens with a probability of 80%. And again, by doing the same calculation, we can see that the expected value of the second event is 360. I can do the same calculation for the case where the calculator is expensive. So if the calculator is an expensive one and it breaks, the expected value of this outcome is 2%, which is the probability an expensive calculator is going to break, times £8 of the cost that Mary pays at the end, so $7.50 for the calculator plus 50p for the postage. So that gives us 0.16 pounds of expected value. And finally, this pathway gives us the expected value of the event where the calculator is expensive and it doesn't break. We don't need to replace it. So that happens with a chance of 98%, a probability of 98%. So 98% times the cost of the calculator gives you an expected value of £6. So this is what Mary sees. what should Mary do? Mary should choose one calculator based on what the expected values that she gets from this, and she wants to pay the least possible. So the expected value for buying a cheap calculator is what you get if you add up events A and B, the expected value for events A and B. So 180 plus 360, whereas the expected value for the expensive calculator is what you get if you add up these two values. And if you do this, you will see that Mary is better off buying a cheap calculator, because then the expected value of that, the expected cost, if you like, of buying a cheap calculator is 540, as opposed to something more if she gets the better one. So Mary can use this weighted decision tree in order to model her choice, a very simple choice in this case, but decision trees can, they don't have to include only two choices or only one node. They can have many, and they can also involve ensemble learning in order to improve performance and overfitting, as we're going to say in a few minutes. So essentially, the way that Mary decided in this simple example is it chose the value that minimized the cost. If she was deciding on, say, a benefit, if she was choosing a job based on expected returns, expected wages, then she would choose the expected value that was the highest, because she would be maximizing a return. So there are different criteria that we can use. I mentioned here maxi-max and maxi-min, and it depends on exactly what you want to achieve and what you're modeling. The equation that we used for Mary's calculation is the one that I show here. So the expected value equation is essentially the probability of something happening times the return that you get for this state of nature. And that gives you the numbers that we had in the previous example. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes to link all this to how we can use decision trees in order to assess the value of information. So let's say that Mary has to make a decision, as she does in the next slide. And she has to make this decision under uncertainty. The question is, if someone was, again, showed up in front of Mary and said, look, I'm going to give you perfect insight, perfect foresight into the problem that you're facing, what is the maximum that Mary should pay for this information? Essentially, the maximum amount, as I show here, that one should pay to deal with uncertainty is the difference between the expected value of uncertainty and the expected value of the best choice that they can make under uncertainty. So let's see this through an example. And here is Mary again, and now Mary is facing a different situation. She bought the calculator, and the reason why she wanted to buy this calculator is because she had a job offer, and she wanted to calculate the returns of this job offer. So Mary has authored a popular novel, and this novel has done very well in the rankings in bookstores, and now it has attracted the attention of a TV network and a movie company. So Mary can choose the one or the other, not both, because they compete with each other. They want to have exclusive rights. So if Mary signs with the TV network, then she will get a lump sum, £900,000, irrespectively of how many people watch it. So if Mary goes for the TV network version of the novel, she knows what she will get with certainty. She will get £900,000. If she goes with the movie producer, then the returns that Mary will get will depend on how well the movie does. It will depend on box office returns. So I will show you what these returns are in the next slide. I have a little table that summarizes these numbers. So the question here is, what should Mary choose? Should Mary go with the TV network, or should she go with the box office, with the movie producer? And the second question is, well, Mary's going to make the first choice under uncertainty because she doesn't know in advance how many tickets the movie producer is going to sell. Now, the second question that we're asking here is if someone could give this information to Mary, so if Mary could make the decision with certainty by using an information, how much should she pay for this information? How do we price this information service in this hypothetical case? So let's start with the first question, where Mary is deciding under uncertainty. And here are the two choices. So the first choice is to go with the movie company, and the second choice is to go with the TV network. If she goes with the movie company, the returns that Mary gets range from 200,000 to 3 million, depending on how many tickets are sold. So here comes the issue of uncertainty. There is a 30% chance that people won't really like the movies, and then Mary will only get 200,000 for it. There is a good chance, 60%, that some people will like it, some people will not. And then Mary will make 1 million. And there is a small chance, 10%, that people will love it. And then Mary will make 3 million. If Mary goes with the TV producer, then it doesn't really matter what happens. She always gets 900,000. So what is Mary going to do? Mary is going to use these probabilities and these returns, and she will calculate expected values for each of the two options, and she will choose the option that gives her the highest expected value. So how does she calculate the expected value, the expected return for the movie producer? Well, she calculates the expected return for each state, so small box office, medium box office, and large box office, and adds them up. So 30% times 200,000, 60% times 1 million, 10% times 3 million will give this number, 960,000. And for the TV producer, it doesn't really matter what the state of the box office is. She always gets 900,000. So what does she choose? She chooses the one that pays the highest. So in this case, with these probabilities and these payoffs, Mary would choose 960,000 because it exceeds the expected return that she would get from the other option, from the TV production. So Mary will, in this case, will go with the movie company. Now let's switch on to the second question. And the second question is, if a consultant showed up and said, look, Mary, I have an offer for you. I'm going to tell you exactly what is going to happen with the box office. I'm going to tell you exactly what the demand is going to be, but you need to pay me for this information. Then Mary would have to decide how much she's prepared to pay and what is the maximum she has to pay. So we're going to do this calculation here to see what is the maximum that Mary should pay in this case. So let's go back to what we know. This is what Mary knows under uncertainty. Now, if there was no uncertainty, Mary would be able to choose what she wants to do under each state of nature. So for instance, if she knew that there is a small box office, Mary would go with the TV network. If she knew that the box office would be medium, Mary would go with the movie producer. And if she knew that the demand, the box office would be large, then she would definitely go even more so with the movie producer. So in the case of a medium and the box office, Mary would always choose to sign with a movie producer. It's only the first state of nature that Mary would prefer to be with the TV network. So in that case, the expected value with perfect insight, with perfect information for Mary, would be 30% times 900,000. So this is the 30% that a small box office happens. In that case, Mary would go with the TV producer. In the other two cases, she would go with a movie producer. So 60% times 1 million and 10% times 3 million. So if Mary knew with certainty which state of nature would happen, then she would have an expected value with perfect information of just over 1 million. Therefore, in that case, the expected value of perfect information is the difference between this number and what she could make earlier, and therefore Mary should not pay more for this information should not pay more than 210,000 pounds. That's the maximum that Mary should pay for getting access to perfect information. Now, we can link this. We were talking about decision theory, essentially, and we're talking about valuation models. We can link this to what is known as expected utility models, where users make decisions, choose outcomes, probabilistic outcomes, based on the utility that they expect to get, or the benefit that they expect to get out of this choice. And this benefit depends on the probability of something happening or not happening, assuming that everything else stays the same. So expected utility models essentially ask, should I do A or B if everything else stays the same except the probability of the event happening? And the expected value of information is essentially the expected value that you get with improved foresight to make this choice, minus the expected utility, the expected value of the expected value that you would get without having the benefit of this forecast. So the advantages and disadvantages of decision trees, and that again is a big chapter. So in the simple examples that we considered, I mean, the decision trees were designed initially as a tool to visualize options and choices, and to understand, to guide, if you like, management decisions. So unsurprisingly, one of the advantages of decision trees is that they do that. They are intuitive to understand, they are intuitive to explain to people, even if they don't have a background in decision theory or economics or statistics. They're very, if you like, data friendly, in the sense that you don't have to transform variables, transform data too much in order to accommodate the needs of a decision tree. It's not like a regression model where you may have to create dummy variables and whatnot in order to perform the calculation. Decision trees essentially use expected values in order to guide you towards a pathway and essentially suggest what is best, what choice you should make. Again, we considered in our examples very simple versions of decision trees, but you can make them as complex as you like. And this is actually one of the limitations of decision trees. Disadvantages that quite often users make them too complicated, too complex, and they end up with what is known as overfitting. And so they can be generalized, but too much generalization can be a bad thing. And they can also be combined with statistical testing to evaluate performance, and also with regression analysis and as other statistical measures. Some disadvantages: they can be unstable. The decision trees essentially don't make forecasts. They're based on what has happened before. They're based on historical data, and they tell you what is the expected return based on the data that you attach to different pathways. So small decision trees can be unstable because they depend on a small number of nodes, and if there's a change in the variation, if there's a change in the payoffs or the probabilities, even by a small amount, it can completely change the outcomes that you get. Going back to the experience that we had in SECLI-FIRM, and please forgive me if I'm rushing a bit. I'm just conscious that I have a lecture at UEA starting in 10 minutes, and I just want to finish my presentation. So going back to SECLI-FIRM, I reflected a little bit earlier on some of the experiences how we found decision trees useful in SECLI-FIRM. For me, one of the biggest benefits of using decision trees in SECLI-FIRM was to understand where exactly the benefit happens. And through this exercise, we were surprised sometimes. Or at least I was surprised. So for instance, in some cases, we realized that management teams and, say, traders, decision makers found seasonal forecasting to be valuable irrespectively of how much it improved performance, because it gave them extra confidence and because it helped them smooth out, if you like, the decision-making process, and it helped as a management tool. It had qualitative effects that we were not looking really to find such effects initially, and they only came up because of, you know, we had this reflection by using the decision trees. This is also one of the limitations of in general valuation methods. It's that not everything can be quantified. We wanted to quantify the monetary value of seasonal forecasts, and that is possible to an extent, but when you look into qualitative benefits, there is a limit to how much you can achieve, and you know, sometimes you have to make strong assumptions, and the strong assumptions may limit the validity of some of the results that you make, that you get. But overall, decision trees are a very powerful tool that enable you to, you can use it for valuation purposes, but also you can use it in order to understand the decision-making process in your organization, to understand where benefits and risks affect the chain of decision, if you like, in your organization, and you can use this information to streamline the management of your resources even further. There is this little code here that we've prepared, a QR code, and that will take you to a final slide that I had for you, to give you an opportunity to reflect on, you know, decision trees. And if you haven't heard about decision trees or you haven't used decision trees before, think how you could use them in your organization. And what we intend to do is that after, you know, a few days, Agathi will tell us when is the right time, but after a few days, when we have your posts, we will make all this available somewhere so you can all see how, you know, what people think about decision trees in the context of their own companies or organizations or universities or teams, whatever it is that you are doing at the moment or you've done before. And essentially that will help you, I hope, to get some more value out of this tool, hearing about this tool, and it will give you something to, it will nudge you in a way to experiment with the use of decision trees further. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry again if it was a little bit rushed, but again, I'm just have a lecture starting in a few minutes. So thank you.